I'm just curious how you're thinking about this second half of the year, because at some point, earnings and fundamentals are going to have to set in and matter, I would think. So far, it seems like, at least in terms of this rally we saw in the second quarter, so much of what drove it were headlines around coronavirus cases, at least until the last couple of weeks, subsiding, breakthroughs in terms of treatments and potential vaccines, and then, of course, green shoots in terms of economic recovery and some of these hardest hit sectors and industries bouncing back off of the lows. When does the sentiment, or I guess the story, begin to shift more towards the actual numbers and the data we're getting?
Morgan, I absolutely agree with you. I'm shocked that we're having the best quarter in 22 years, based on, I think I'm not alone in feeling that way. However, there's been a lot of quantitative easing put into the market, and the market has chosen to focus on that. I think that we're going to get a turn when investors begin to pay attention to earnings, and you're going to have earnings starting, a revision starting over the next 2 weeks and into next month. And what you're going to see is similar to what you saw in Nike, where 100% of analysts had the earnings estimates wrong. Nike lost more money than anyone expected. They were okay in China, but okay in digital, but across the board in the U.S., which you might expect with COVID-19 raging, their earnings were absolutely down. And yet, Nike's had a very good year, all things considered. And on the earnings announcement, the stock only went down 5%. I think investors have been ultimately very optimistic about quantitative easing and not paying as much attention to earnings. And I do think the macro factors look somewhat positive, but you do have states reopening stalling. And at the end of the day, earnings are going to matter. Even if the economy is open, if consumers do not show up, it's going to impact earnings. And for the second part of the year, I think we're going to see more of that. And I do think that you'll begin to see the market begin to moderate a little bit more than it has during the second quarter.
FedEx, by the way, up 7% after hours. Their earnings just crossing the tape. We'll have the details on that for you in just a moment. Eugene, just want to come back to one of the things you mentioned there towards the end of your answer. There clearly have been some headlines about reopenings having to be paused or reversed. If that continues and becomes a broader trend, how much steam could that take out of the equity market?
Well, it should take a lot out. I mean, if you think about, we're coming into July 4th, right? And 2 weeks ago, the beaches in Florida, the beaches in Texas, they were expecting crowds. And even though they were going to socially distance, those bars and restaurants were ready to get going. Now those beaches are closed. Last year on the 4th of July, I was in Cabo. I thought about going to Georgia. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to probably get a barrel of good Maryland blue crabs and sit out on my deck with a couple of friends and eat those. So instead of $4,000 or $5,000 being spent, I'm probably going to spend $300 or $400. And I think that's going to be across the board, across the country. And that all translates down into how much money companies are actually making. So while I think it's important to get the economy reopened, there's a lot more commentary about getting it reopened right, because as long as investors are feeling safe, or as long as consumers aren't feeling safe, they're not going to go into the businesses. They're going to hunker down. Everybody wants to be out. I certainly do, right? But I think we're just going to have to deal with this. And one other thing I'll point out, you're talking about airlines at the beginning of the clip. With Europe opening up, right, and not allowing the U.S. to come in, I think that impacts the European economy, even though I understand, why. I think that all of these factors that we've kind of glossed over, we're really going to pay the piper over the next 6 to 12 months. And I think you'll start seeing it towards the latter half of July.